turn this guy on. The power is on. Yep, there we go. Oh, fantastic. So I'm going to call to order the Town of Colonial Beach Planning Commission meeting for March 12th, 2026 at 6 p.m. First order of business is a call to order and Pledge of Allegiance. So please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All planning commissioners are present this evening for our determination of quorum. And next is approval of meeting agenda. Other than I think we'll be fine keeping that point where it is, but do we have any other adjustments or amendments to the agenda? Can I get a motion? Second? All right. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. Move things right along. Next is approval of minutes from our January 29th special meeting and the February 12th, 2026. I believe this is with the adjustments that you said Mr. Long had suggested.
Yeah, so on January 29th minutes, we added on page 5, I believe it is, or maybe it's 3. On page 3, under 5E, that last bullet was not in the minutes that you received before. To be in the records, just to show what the intent was, should anybody look back.
Mr. Chairman, can I
Yes.
speak to that? I think you put that in the wrong section.
Oh, did I?
You put it under 5AE, and it should be in...
Oh, you're
Should be
right.
in 5BE as a third bullet point, because the comment
Actually-
is about 100 Washington Avenue, not
Yeah, you're
about
right.
the communication facility.
You're right, sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to move that change, which I just described,
Okay,
as it was in the wrong place.
that makes sense.
I move that we adopt the January 29th minutes as amended.
Any second?
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so meeting minutes for January 29th, 2026 have been adopted as amended. Do we have any other amendments or adjustments for the February 12th minutes? No. Can I get a motion?
I move that we adopt the February 12th minutes.
A second? All right. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. February 12th, 2026 regular meeting minutes adopted as presented. Next order of business is the public comment on non-public hearing commission and land use items. We don't have anybody in the gallery. Do we have any submissions for entry into the record?
No,
Nope. Okay,
nothing has been received.
all right. We'll go ahead and proceed. Planning and Community Development Director's Report is the next item on the agenda.
Thank you. You have a written report on page 10 of the packet. Are there any questions about that? I have one more item to add, 2 more items to add.
You have short-term rentals and short-term rentals new. Can you help us understand that?
Okay, and that first one is not short-term rentals, those are single-family dwellings, sorry. So there were 8
So it's-
single-family dwellings, and then the one short-term rental is a new one for this year. The letters for short-term rentals beginning, that season starts May 1st through April 30th, so those letters are going out this week or next.
Mr.
The other thing I wanted to add to that is, Ms. Luna and I did meet earlier. You may have seen in my report that John's last day is tomorrow, our Community Enhancement Officer, which is a huge bummer for all of us. He's been quite good, and one of the things he's been doing for us is he has read the whole comp plan, marked up some of the areas that he knows we need to pay attention to. He had also started getting some demographics from some of the state agencies. So he's going to be missed for the comp plan as well. But anyway, that happened after Miss Luna and I met, so I am still waiting to hear back from some potential partners that, like the PDC and places like that. Department heads right now are reviewing the prospective chapters and sections of the comp plan and sharing with committees as applicable. I had given them a deadline of March 20th to get me any revisions that they have. Economic development may take longer because they've got some extra committees and they have a lot of changes, I think. A lot has happened with Main Street and stuff since then. But hopefully we'll get most of that back from the department heads just for their first cursory review. I will be out of town March 24th through 29th. I have a new grandbaby. So we'll work in earnest when I return. I would suggest that between now and our next meeting in April, that I send you out the first 24 pages of the comp plan, which don't have the demographics and stuff in it. Ask you to review that. Get me comments by March 30th when I return, and I can make some revisions and bring that back for discussion at our April meeting, and then assign the next chapters as we move along and get more demographic material. So that is my report. Any questions?
I just wanted to add one thing that we did discuss at that meeting, is that we need another commission member to volunteer to be on the committee. And so we're really hoping that someone will volunteer.
She's looking at you down at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll do it.
Oh, great, bravo.
Mr. Long, you said you had a question.
No, just a quick
Okay.
question. With the one short-term rental added, does that make 140 STRs in the town now? It was 139 in the January minutes, I think, because I asked the question then. So I'm assuming we're at 140.
I knew we
think
were in the 130s, but
it's not important, but I think for the next report, it would be just interesting to keep track of that number. I think it's a useful number for the town and some of the businesses in the town to be aware of.
thank you much.
All right, that concludes the director's report. Ms. Luna, would you like to expand on any of the other?
No,
Or
I
that
think
was it?
that covered it. Yeah, we've
Okay.
got our work cut out for us.
Do we have any other committee reports or updates?
I attend, it's now called the Economic Vitality Committee, which is a subset of downtown Colonial Beach. As Angela just said, there's a lot going on there, a lot of positive stuff going on there, but I don't see anything there that impacts, apart from the comprehensive plan, any of the things we're currently working on. So I won't take up your time with a blow-by-blow account of what's happening. But there are good things happening, and I think having a relationship with them, if it's not me, somebody, is valuable because of what they're trying to do and the impact that may have on certain planning applications that could come along to the town in future, but I don't have anything to report at the moment.
Okay, sounds good. Anything else? Okay, sounds good. All right, we have no public hearings this evening, and we're lumping everything into new business. So, I guess the first thing we're gonna dive into is the telecommunications facility discussion only.
On page 11 of your packet, we'll start there, is the report. A lot of it looks similar to what you saw before, but I will let you know, if you hadn't been tuning in, that when this came to town council, they had some concerns, and as did we internally, in terms of how we could deny a tower in an area that people would not like towers, like the Point, the Shoreline, places like that. So we ask that they refer it back to you all for consideration with the regulations that are provided this evening. This is for discussion tonight. Council has agreed to a joint public hearing at your next meeting in April, because they canceled their April work session because of spring break and the holidays. And I said, hey, we can fill your time up just fine. So we're going to do a joint public hearing, advertise it once. That will help the applicant, who's been working with us for months and actually had been looking at this for a couple of years, move this process along. So most of the report is similar to what you've seen, except for on page 12 under discussion. So I did want to give you some additional information and let you know that the representative for the applicant for the CUP is here tonight and can answer questions after I go through the report. But they did submit formally a request to us in late October. And as you know, you guys, we talked about it at the November meeting. You asked to bring the text back in December. We did that, and then in January had the public hearing and moved it forward to council. I did add some points under the Telecommunications Act that we had taken out of the report last time, but I just want to let you know that telecommunications has this act, and it really does prohibit us from, we can't prohibit towers from being in town. We can put restrictions and things on them, and I think I brought up last time the portion of the safety issue. As long as the towers and what's built have gone through the FCC's environmental effects, you can't use things that are floating around there for that. So that's under the discussion. What we did determine was that we mapped, and you'll see in your report on page 12, we mapped 100 yards from any residential district, schools, parks. He actually included churches, but it doesn't matter one way or another, and the shoreline. And basically what you have is what's shown on your map. When I bring it back to Planning Commission in the presentation, I'll show the whole town too, but there are no other areas in town that fit that, because the other area would be up by Wilkerson's, but that's shoreline, and then of course the point between the bay and the river. So what you have there is basically the area surrounding the Food Lion, and then just a little bit of area across 205 next to the townhouses that's all wooded right now. So this ordinance, with the regulations, would limit it to that area. Council had also asked us to consider removing the 100-foot height restriction. When it came to you, that was a request, but after I went back and asked why, it was because staff a couple of years ago had asked them to limit it to 100 foot. Council wanted us to consider future applications and not affecting future technologies by this. And so what you have when we get to the other packet is maps on what the different heights will do for coverage in town. So that's my report, but moving then to page 14, the zoning text amendment. All we've done is taken off the 100-foot height restriction and just put communication facility, and you had the The definition of communication facility was back on the first page of the report. The second attachment, the proposed zoning text amendment 2602, is the meat of this whole thing, and I think what some of you had hoped for before in terms of the restrictions and regulations. So the very top bullet in the packet that you have on your desk is probably the most important, and I neglected to put it in the report that I sent out first, but it adds a location that telecommunication towers are permitted in the C1 General Commercial District. However, it must be located no less than 100 yards from residential districts, schools, parks, and shorelines. And even though we only have R1 and R2 right now in town, I put residential districts in case we expand on that. There's some structural requirements. Point 3, just wanted to pull out to your attention. This is related to satellite dishes and microwave dish antennas not exceeding more than 3.5 feet in diameter. The county allows up to 6 feet. Other localities allow 3.5, so I took 3.5. I think that's probably not the technologies that people are moving forward with anyway. And then number 6 under B, I had an airport listed, and we don't have that airport nearby, so it's changed. The last sentence is a hazard for existing, future, and planned airspaces, which is generic, but, you know, I can't, that's an FCC and FAA thing, so it's in there. C deals with the co-location, and it's also dealt with again in J4, but C, wherever possible prior to a new tower being built, the applicant must show valid technological, economic, and physical justification as to why co-location is not possible. D concerns the lighting, of course, FCC and FFA always can determine things, but otherwise, they really need to follow our guidelines and limit the lighting. So E is another big one for the setbacks, and I need to change that since we added A. So the first sentence should say, where a telecommunications tower is camouflaged as provided by B4, and I'll change that, the setbacks, et cetera. So the minimum setback from the boundary of the property deals with the fall zone, which they'll have to have a licensed engineer look at the fall zone. And this is really just a way to protect should the tower fall. The whole tower won't fall at one time, which is what this is saying with the engineer to tell us where that fall zone would be. I'm not a technical expert. That's why we send it out to engineers. But if you have questions on that, let me know, and we'll get an expert to answer them by the public hearing time. The second is minimum setback for off-site dwellings. So they need to be 200 feet away from the bank building, basically, or any other buildings there, so that a tower does not fall into the bank. And then the minimum setback for the public rights-of-way are listed there, and that's from our road, so we won't have as much. Of course, then number 4 goes on to say that if they're within the existing wooded area, and I assume you're going to keep the wooded area? So 4 would pertain to that. I know there were concerns before about signs being prohibited and not allowing advertisement, and that's dealt with in F. Security issues are G. Landscaping and screening, basically they follow our landscaping, except that we can make some exceptions, and we can make sure that everything's screened appropriately. Then I is dealing with the decommissioning, basically a removal of abandoned, unsafe, or unused telecommunications. They have up to 6 months at the expense of the owner to remove it if it's no longer used. If they're moving their antenna, but there are still antennas on there from co-location, then they obviously won't be taking the tower down. But those are on there. And then J is where the meat and potatoes are in this. This is what needs to be included in the conditional use permit. Again, they did not get these requirements until they were well working within the CUP application, so you may see some changes in the CUP. And if there are any things that we can't meet here, I'll bring those back as well. But This just basically lays out what they need to address in their CUP. You'll see J4, again, there's some co-location. This one says that if their tower is above 100 feet, they're gonna make sure that they can co-locate 3 additional users, including themselves, on that tower. They have already committed to that, even with the 100 foot, I think they were gonna co-locate 3, so. And then the photographs and stuff, I did remind them that they had said that y'all could be invited to the balloon test to show that. The other stuff is some technical stuff. Obviously, site plan is required in K. In L, obstruction in M, and then some safety regulations. Are there any questions on that before we get into the more detailed CUP and their actual plan?
So because this is a joint venture between a tower company and a specific provider, is users in this context other communications providers? Yes,
Which,
okay.
where you, in any of it, yes, any of the users of the tower
Okay.
would be people who are using the tower. I don't know which, are you looking at one specifically?
No, just generally, because it's a Verizon joint venture, are the other telecommunications carriers going to be able to access that under the other users for a minimum of 3? So that was what I was trying to clarify.
They'll have their own lease agreements.
Well, absolutely, but
Yeah.
as far as it was, is trying to clarify if the intent was exclusive Verizon use or inclusive with other providers.
Inclusive, yeah, we expect for them to be able to co-locate. So the tower, Verizon does already have an antenna on the tower over by the wastewater treatment plant. This, as you'll see, will give them coverage where they don't have coverage now, but of course, if they don't have coverage, they've got to contract with somebody else, and they're providing off of somebody else's equipment as well. So, yeah.
So when you say co-locate, they can actually put other communication services on the tower in addition to maybe another tower. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes.
Okay.
So when you drive and you see, and I don't have the picture, I will have one next time, you see the big monopole, just the big silver pole is what they're suggesting. And you see 3 different arrays, that's what it is. And so they'll put theirs up, and then somebody else can come put theirs and come put theirs. And is there a picture of one of those in here, maybe? But yeah, so there will be, and that's what they all do. It's a whole lot cheaper and more cost-effective for the companies to co-locate on somebody else's tower. Do you have anything to add to that? You're welcome to stand up to the microphone if you'd like. And if you hear me say anything that doesn't sound right technologically, let me know.
No problem. Good afternoon, Chairman Howell, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Tyler Rose. I'm an attorney with the law firm Williams Mullen. I'm here tonight on behalf of the Towers LLC, as you mentioned, joint venture between Vertical Bridge and Verizon Wireless. I'd like to thank Ms. Lawrence and the staff for all the hard work on the zoning text amendment and the application. I know it's been kind of an interesting process so far, but she's done a great job on the ordinance, and we're supportive of getting this ordinance in place and locating a tower in the town and servicing the citizens and residents of the town. In terms of your question on the co-location, yes, so typically, as Ms. Lawrence just noted, you have the tower, and then Verizon usually takes the top spot, which in terms of propagation is usually the best, and then there's space underneath that tower array and that space within like 5 to 7 feet usually, and then T-Mobile can come on with their array, and then some other carrier can come on with their array below that, and then another carrier below that. And typically, you run into height restrictions in terms of propagation by going lower than that, but usually 3 additional carriers for a tower of this height would be usually appropriate.
So if you look at SP3 on these big plans, you'll see that demonstrated. If they had 150 tower with a 3-foot lightning rod, they would take those, and then what you see at the very top could be duplicated below for the other 2 carriers. There's a good example of a monopole with, I think, 3 arrays as you're going towards 301 down 205. You'll pass a wooden fence, and pass the first light before you get to 301. And then there's a little side road there. I had to go by twice to see. Kyler had told me about it. But there's a little side road there, and if you pull back to that cul-de-sac, you can really see it. But if not, from the road where the trees are, you don't even notice it. And they have 3 arrays, and it's a monopole, which is more of the design that you're seeing now. So if you want to move to the next clipped packet that you have is their application for a conditional use permit. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing tonight. I will say, you'll see in the first paragraph under site description on the second page, 150 feet is what they're proposing now. And then you'll see in the second paragraph that they did look at the water tower. That was brought up here, I think, and then also at council. And it gives the reasons, a structure not being adequate to support the telecommunications equipment, the ground space under the tower not being available due to underlying water lines. And then there's no access road over there, even though it's real close, so. And then the rest of this kind of just hits on the parts of the conditional use application that we ask, and they did. They really went through a whole lot of how it relates to the comp plan and how it fits with the vision of the comp plan. And then finally, if you go through the text, you'll see the 3 maps. So the first map is what's existing. The green circles are existing Verizon coverage right now. That's not to say that, like I said, they're not using somebody else's contract and stuff. But right now, what Verizon is able to do is what you see in the green, based on their towers, and that's the one at the wastewater treatment plant. I'm guessing the other one is over by the convenience center, maybe. And then another. And then if you go to the second one, if they were allowed the 100-foot tower, you'll see the red is what they would get if they added the 100-foot tower where they're proposing it. Then if you go to the third, you'll see how they can expand their coverage at 150 feet. And then the fourth is 195 feet with the 3-foot antenna, would take it just below 199. We encourage them to look at 150. Do you have what? Oh, okay. Yeah, we encouraged 150, not to go to 195. The monopoles in the county, that limit is 195. I assumed you didn't want to go above the county limit, but that still pretty much fills in a lot of the service. And then you'll see on that 150 foot that at some point they'll want to put a new small cell site down there on the point to give them a little more coverage. And that is what they're proposing. And so I'll be happy to answer questions or let the representative here answer some of your questions so that we can move this forward. Again, council's already authorized a joint public hearing. So I don't need any. You guys have to show up. Ms. Luna has informed me that she will not be here for the April meeting. But what we will do at that meeting is look at the CUP, the 2 zoning text amendments, and also will address a substantial accord with the comp plan. I have them as 2 zoning text amendments because they're in 2 separate sections of the code. Or can I put them all in one?
I thought the last draft, you put them in one. Why do you combine the one with the footage with the distance?
No, this one is putting it under the definition, or the conditional use section in 8.2, and then this is in the miscellaneous, yeah,
so
different
2.
section of the code.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, sorry.
Mr. Hitchens here.
What part of the town currently doesn't have coverage by Verizon? Because I live all the way down on the point, and I've got excellent,
So,
Service.
I don't know if you want to address that. Like I said, I think it's covered by their contracts with other services.
Yeah, so the way sites are determined, so carriers have RF engineers that basically analyze the network and look for either weak spots or coverage gaps, and they're always trying to build out and strengthen their independent networks. And so they go through that process. They issue a search ring, which is usually about a mile wide, saying that we have either insufficient or no coverage in this area, and we need to increase our coverage to allow for a sufficient network. And they issued a search ring for this area, and then the site acquisition individual went out and identified this property. So in terms of whether there is no or limited coverage in certain parts, Verizon itself has determined that this is an area that needs improved coverage with respect to its network, and they've made that determination and identified this area through their search ring process. So there may be patchy, you may catch it off of a county tower or through a repeater in the town, but in terms of the quality of the network that is currently being provided here, they've deemed it insufficient, and have identified this as an area that needs a tower and additional coverage.
I mean, the basis of my question is, why do we need it?
Right, if people are still getting coverage.
Yeah, well, I mean, so in terms of whether you, again, it's a determination that Verizon has made in terms of the strength of their network. And that determination usually goes through a pretty rigorous engineering process, and it's guided by FCC regulations and state rules in terms of how they come up with that search ring and what kind of quality coverage in terms of the network that they need to have and provide to their customers. So having Verizon coverage in the town doesn't necessarily preclude the need from Verizon's standpoint and from the SEC standpoint and from the, I guess, in terms of state code, whether Verizon is able to determine that this tower is needed in terms of building out their network.
So is it fair to say that where there's not Verizon from a Verizon array, that you're still getting Verizon coverage because of some agreement that they have with other?
Right, yeah, so in terms of, you may not be getting, right, thank you for the clarification. So you may not be getting Verizon service from a Verizon array. You may be getting Verizon service through a deal that Verizon has through another carrier from T-Mobile to allow for, to use their network for certain providers. But in terms of their own coverage map, those agreements have certain or certain conditions and terms, and they're not permanent, so they want to build out their own network. So in terms of providing continuous and reliable Verizon coverage, carriers want to build out their own independent networks, and so they've identified this as a need and wanted to pursue the tower in this location based on that analysis.
I can't answer what you're asking in terms of, yes.
Okay, well, I was curious if you could maybe expand on what kind of enhancement will we see here in town as a result of this?
Yeah, so this tower will provide the newest technology, obviously, because it'll be new. So, and I think I spoke with Ms. Lawrence briefly about it also. But in terms of the spectrum and the type of coverage that it will provide 5G coverage. And the discussion we had earlier was the distinction between 5G, as some think of it as just the small cell facilities that you may think, but that's high 5G millimeter wave technology that allows for 1 gigabyte to 3 gigabytes per second in download speed, whereas this will be low to medium bandwidth of 5G, which will provide for a much higher download speed and coverage of strength than existing 4G networks. So you may be getting Verizon coverage off of a 4G tower through T-Mobile. If you have a Verizon 5G array on a new tower, then your download speeds will be much faster in terms of businesses that are using Verizon networks or even other networks that will be able to piggyback off of that technology. So, and then your mobile phone coverage will be much more reliable, and your download speeds will be much faster because you'll be using better, higher technology.
And just to follow up to that, what enhancements do you see with regard to the internet services?
So in terms of if you're getting like fiber network, yeah, so I don't know if there's going to be a fiber network built out, but in terms of having wireless internet based on the Verizon network, you can have, it'll increase, the 5G technology will increase the internet technology that relies on that 5G technology as a backbone. So it should be a increase in mobile coverage technology and also internet access.
So basically, 5G hotspots and as
Yeah,
you're
it'll
traveling
just
around, you'll
increase
get
the
better
overall
internet on your
network
phone.
and coverage and download speeds.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've got a few questions here. Sorry, that's kind of loud. Personally, I have Verizon. I get 1 bar at my house on 9th Street. I have an AT&T work phone, and I think I get 2 bars on that. Either way, I'm just saying we don't get the best service on 9th Street. But the other question I have is, once the tower is potentially built, who owns it after that? Is it the towers or is it Verizon?
Yes, it would be the towers that owns it, and that's why it's a joint venture between the two. Vertical Bridge is usually the infrastructure provider, and then they'll build the towers, own the towers, and then Verizon will lease a space on the towers. So this is a newer business venture between the two, but the towers will own the actual physical tower, and Verizon will be a leaseholder on the tower, and then other mobile providers will come in and be other leaseholders in terms of their arrays on the tower.
Okay, my next question's for Angela, in the town. As far as the notes we had in, I for removal of abandoned or unused telecommunications towers, sometimes these towers get sold, a couple of times. We don't really know what's gonna happen in the future. Looking at the language, is there something we can include to require like a decommissioning bond or something, just in case that ever happens?
Yeah, I know what you're saying, that localities do that with solar farms and things like that a little bit more. Let me look into that and see what we need to do with that.
Okay, and then just a little note on the language for decommissioning. If we could add some language for that, it's full removal of the tower, yes, but they would also have to do the foundation removal, any underground utilities, and site restoration for that.
Foundation removal, and what was the other?
Underground utilities and site restoration. And so the potential decommissioning bond would cover that. Questions, I guess maybe this is during the CUP process, but as far as site maintenance standards, maybe we could have some language that they're required to, maintain everything that they've got there. As far as vegetation, it's not something that the town's gonna be going over there and cutting the grass or anything. The other question I had is, I know we've got, the fence we show on the plans is chain link. Can we require slats on the chain link as far as like a visibility? I know we care a lot about how things are gonna look and if they're gonna be an eyesore or not. Is that something can we require? And as far as the actual monopole, can we require it to be stealth or like those faux tree monopoles, or?
What was the first question, besides the faux tree, what did you say?
If we could require slats in the chain link fence?
No, on the monopole could be what?
Could we require them to have stealth designs where it's
Oh,
that
okay.
it looks like a fake tree or something?
Make it look like a palm tree.
Well, those can be, some people really don't like them because they stand out even more because they're twice the size of any tree in town.
Pick your
but,
poison.
You don't want palm tree.
No. Or even a pine tree.
I will say those do impact the propagation too.
They
so it's-
do?
Yeah.
They don't, you don't get as good a service if you do this?
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me do a little bit more research and bring that back.
And the one last question I had is just if we're going to require structural inspection every 3 to 5 years. I know we've had areas with bad soil, so we're just going to make sure that if they are doing that for their own due diligence, that we're getting that on file with our information as well. And that's all my questions.
Okay, I'll clean that language up a little bit. I'll do a little bit more research.
Could I, just thought I was gonna ask a question. I don't think anyone's addressed it.
All right, we'll allow Mr. Long.
Okay, I'd hate to step in front of you.
No, no, no.
So,
That
I,
was very easy to follow.
that's why I hated to step in front of you. I had also noted the question of bond, decommissioning bond as the county requires on the solar facilities. I don't know if it's practical, but I think it would be protection for the town. I wanted to, I would agree with the applicant that the process has been interesting. I think that's the word you used. I think that's extremely kind of you to say that. On J4, why are we only requiring the co-location if the tower is 101 feet or more high? Why do we not take out that first section up to the word height and require, so that if the applicant in the end, or some other applicant in some other location, chose to put in a 99-foot high tower, they would still be required to offer co-location?
I think it's a technology thing. If you don't get high enough up on the
Yeah.
tower, you can't use it. But
Okay, it was a question.
I'll double check on that because they had said before they could co-locate others if it was 100-foot tall.
Well, that's why I was wondering about it, because we were talking about it in the previous
Okay.
iteration of this, so I think it will be good to know that. And I mean, just again, as I said, when we started this last year, I think it's in the interests of the health, welfare and safety of the people we're representing here, that we do add to the cell phone coverage. If I look at my personal Verizon phone, I have one bar and LTE only where I'm sitting. And so we need to increase the coverage. I've been in commercial establishments that can't run their online payment system because, something isn't working properly. I think it will improve the commercial and personal benefits of the town. Although there are areas of town which are adequately serviced by Verizon. I happen to live in one of them. I happen to use Verizon 5G wireless internet in my house, and it's excellent, not least because it's half the price of or less than half the price of the
Competitor.
fiber option that's open. And the final thing I'm not sure I'm concerned about it, I just wanted to maybe some more information on this fall zone. So I understand in the location that's being proposed, which I guess really comes under the cut process, it will be more than 100 feet away from the bank that's situated there. Are we concerned about anything falling on the public road? Do we need to worry about something falling on New Monrovia? Or will the engineering study make sure that we're keeping our residents safe as they drive past it? That was my final comment.
Yeah, actually, about the fall zone, if you mind me responding to that. So the poles are designed so they actually fall in they call it telescoping. So they actually don't fall like a tree. They actually break apart in pieces and they telescope down. So for a 150-foot tower, generally the fall zone is actually, they're engineered to be about 50% of the actual height of the tower. So a 150-foot tower would have probably an expected outside fall zone radius of 75 feet. And so they're designed to break apart, and there's brackets on the tower so it doesn't fall. So a 150-foot tower does not have a 150-foot fall zone.
Which is why there's a requirement for a certified engineer to sign off on it.
Right, and we always provide an engineer letter that actually will spell that out in more detail.
Okay, thank you.
Good question.
Mr. Mullen first.
Yeah, mine's for Angela real quick. So I'm gonna put my fire hat on. So I don't know if that's part of the cup or we have to put it in here somewhere. access to the site through a Knox box. That needs to be somewhere, so we can get access to it.
I think we always provide a Knox box.
Yeah.
The county just passed, or they're in the process,
In the
I guess,
process.
they're gonna advertise it. Yeah, and we've been looking at that. I think that will come under the building inspection when the county passes that, because we had looked at, and we still may bring something back to y'all, but when I read the language of what went before the board this week, it looked like that's gonna kick in during all the mechanical and technical and the trades.
Trades, yeah.
But yeah, we'll look into that as well.
Yes, I was curious, have you seen other jurisdictions imposed a bond requirement in the past?
That's actually governed by the Virginia Code. So there's, the requirement under the code is if bonds are required for other similar uses, then the jurisdiction may allow for a bond, but that similar use requirement is kind of vague. So typically, we don't see bonds, but we can evaluate further in terms of how the county imposes bond requirements on other uses and, see if that's something that's appropriate for this particular application.
Do you typically see 8-foot chain link fences around cell sites, or do you typically see 6-foot?
I think, typically 6 foot.
Right, well, I thought I had seen 8-foot, but maybe we should just look into what would be good for the town if we do need to require 8-foot.
I think we typically just abide by the ordinance if there's a requirement of whatever the height requirement is. 6 feet sticks in my mind for some reason, though.
Okay.
I'll double check.
Mr. Wood, you want far away?
And actually, I'm going to be piggybacking on what Mr. Long had said. One of the areas, and there was a commissioner who had a question about where do we see a lack of coverage? Just anecdotally, it's really bad in some of the businesses, especially when we're trying to conduct things on the Hill, and we have those individual credit card readers. They're almost unworkable a lot of the times. So I think we probably lose some revenue there. And also, honestly, it breaks my heart sometimes where you'll see at the McDonald's where people will drive away because they can't connect to the Wi-Fi. So I agree with you, generally speaking, my phone works well. But there are areas where it's more the wireless internet that I think is what lags, so. Do you foresee the tower assisting with those sorts of issues?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I'll bring up one more thing. So if we ever have a major disaster here and our EOC is set up in the fire department where it may be, we're going to need that extra bandwidth because you're going to have 15,000 people want to be on their cell phones. So that's a huge plus for us.
And I guess you saw in I meant to pull it out just for your benefit, if nothing else, the interference with emergency communications is addressed in here as well, so, yeah.
Any other questions or discussion? No? Well, thank you very much for coming and answering our questions.
Of course. Thank you for your
Thank you.
time.
So how this will work is on April 9th, council had asked us to put this at the very top of our agenda after the pledge and.
Of course,
Order.
yeah.
So we'll do a joint public hearing. We'll call both bodies to order, do the joint public hearing, let them go home. Then you guys can consider that night. And if you choose to forward a recommendation, they will consider it as early as April 15th. I know there's a lease agreement that hits the April 15th deadline, but I felt confident there's a small extension that can be made. So, yeah, so that's the hope, is that we get all of our questions answered between now and then you guys can make a recommendation one way or another.
Can I just, will that be the zoning text amendment that we'll be considering, or a zoning text amendment, we should use the plural, the two zoning text amendments plus CUP?
So what what the applicant has asked for, since this has gone back and forth a couple times, is normally, as you know, when we have a zoning text amendment, we do them not concurrently because you can't recommend a CUP if council hasn't recommended the zoning text amendment, but you can do them concurrently. And so, yes, we're going to ask you to make a recommendation on the two zoning text amendments and the CUP contingent on council approving the text amendment. They get the final say-so anyway. And then I'm going to do a little bit more research on what's required for the substantial conformance with the comp plan as it relates to telecommunication, and that may also be a vote that night. But yes, you'll do them both. If you're comfortable doing the CUP, you'll do that contingent on council
But the
approving the text amendment.
Public hearing for both zoning text amendments and the CUP notification is being issued for all three of those.
Right,
Okay,
right.
got it.
Yep,
Thank you for the clarification.
thank you. I appreciate, you guys really did your homework, and I appreciate that.
Okay. It sounds like we're ready to talk about the new fire department building.
Hi, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. This is Darla Odom here, and I was going to talk with you just a little bit about the upcoming zoning that you will have. We're advertising them for your April 9th meeting. This would be for the Long Beach Volunteer Fire Department is proposing to construct a building on a property that is 0.7 of an acre. And it's identified as tax maps 3A2 to 88, parcels 8 through 11. They are proposing the storage building to store fire equipment as well as fire apparatus. And they also want to have an area of the building for meetings and special events, or what we would refer to as a community facility. So the zoning ordinance categorizes the proposed fire station use as an emergency service establishment, which is permitted by right in the commercial residential CR zoning district. If you look at the subject property right now, part of the property is zone C1. It fronts Garfield Avenue, approximately 200 feet along Garfield Avenue. If you look at the map on the memo in your packet, the property is outlined in red. It shows it as being the subject property. It's right behind Lenny's Restaurant, so approximately 50 feet from Colonial Avenue, just north of Colonial Avenue on Garfield. The property is also on your map. I know you can see that the Colonial Beach Fire Department, its existing building is shown. That existing building will stay. There's no plan to change that building. They just need additional space for some of the additional equipment that they have and the vehicles. And then as a fundraiser opportunity, they wanted to have the ability to have this community facility. When this comes before you, you will be hearing two parts to this. One is a substantial accord determination, which is required by the state code 15.2-2232 for any public facility that's proposed. So we'll prepare for you the substantial accord determination and offer that information to you based on compliance with the comprehensive plan. And then second, you'll have a case that includes rezoning the subject property from C1 and R2 to commercial residential CR. That's proposed as being a transitional zoning category between the commercial uses that are along Colonial Avenue and then back towards the residential uses that are on Franklin Avenue as well as Jackson Street. And properties to the east of the subject property on the opposite side of Garfield are also zoned commercial residential CR. So we felt like that was the appropriate zoning classification. Within that district, the ordinance permits a fire service establishment by right, and it requires a conditional use permit for the community facilities in the CR district. And so that's why you will have a rezoning request with a conditional use permit approval request to accommodate what the fire department is proposing. And again, this is being advertised for your April 9th meeting. It will not be a joint public hearing with town council. We're asking town council, since they have lots of things scheduled in April, we are asking them, we'll be asking them actually next week to schedule their public hearing on this case at their May 5th, I think it's May 5th work session date. So just wanted to give you a heads up, basically, that this was coming forward. Be glad to answer any questions, but again, just to let you know that this will be on your agenda for April 9th. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Long?
I noticed you tried to look the other way first. But, so, Darla, what I'm intrigued about, concerned about, is parking in relation to this. Once we tackle the change of zoning, and I realized the two lots, 8 and 9, when I looked them up, were the C1, and the two behind it are R2. So we'll be losing 2 residential lots when zoning areas when we do this. But my biggest concern is parking. Now, I wouldn't want anyone to think that I was only concerned about parking when I go to Lenny's, because I'm only concerned about the public interest here, of course. But as you can see on the picture you provided, you know, everybody at Lenny's parks behind there. That, on occasions, is completely full. Do we need at this point, or at some point, or when we do a CUP, do we get an opportunity to look at the whole parking implications for this change?
Yes, sir. They do have a site plan that they prepared that we'll be evaluating and presenting to you with the CUP staff report when you get it. The fire department has been working with Lenny's, and I, shout out to Lenny's. The staff folks know that that's, one of my, I have to have my Lenny's every so often. But so the fire department has been working with the customers of Lenny's and allowing them to use their parking area as overflow. According to the chief, the fire department intends to continue that relationship because based on their parking layout and their daily use of the building, there will be spaces that should be available for those clients that are transient users of Lenny's. So there shouldn't be a conflict, but yes, that has been discussed and you'll hear some more about that at the public hearing.
Thank you.
Would this be a great opportunity to revive the campaign to restrike Colonial Avenue? Yeah.
Restrike Colonial Avenue to have parking all along?
Originally, that's what it was. That's why it's a double wide corridor, is because it's actually was originally laid out to have on-street parking parallel all the way up and down both sides. And there's historic pictures. I love going across the street to the museum occasionally, and they've got, in the 50s, cars lined all the way up and down the boulevard. It's a pretty cool sight.
Yeah.
And Mr. Chairman, if I might, parking still is allowed along Colonial Avenue. It's not striped as individual spaces right now, but parking is permitted everywhere except where the curbing is yellow.
Correct. Yeah,
So-
it's
Yeah,
allowed.
so there is
It's-
some parking out in front of Lenny's that's permitted.
Yes.
Yeah, yes, sir.
We're just trying to make that public signaling available for people, especially since, we've been getting larger and larger crowds every year, and it keeps continually, progressively moving down Colonial even for beachfront parking, so, I just was a thought, since
That's
we're,
It's a good point. I only learned that we were able to park on Colonial Avenue when everything was iced over, because I go to the Mindful Mermaid, which is across
Oh,
the
yeah.
street from Lenny's there in that other, like upper corner.
Uh-huh.
And the parking lot was iced over, and she's, we can park up the street. I'm like, you sure? You sure? I'm not gonna get towed."
absolutely, no, and, yeah, and that's what, like, even if it's just a, yes, you can park
Yeah.
on Colonial Avenue campaign, but I would like to see it get restricted, but.
Yeah, I usually park right off the street to pick up my Old Bay wings from Lenny's, so it would be helpful.
Yeah, so
Mr. Malone?
I'll just give you some information about what we want to put in this new building. So as you can see on the picture too, our boat's sitting there. It's not in the water right now. It's not in the water in the wintertime, so we need a place to store it. We also have a trailer there with hazmat stuff in it. We would like to get a lot of that stuff inside. And then we also have our second fire engine that we don't use all the time now, so we need a place to store that. So we have a lot of equipment, you know, that we need to move around and get another storage place in there. And then the other side of it is having a place for people to have their weddings, you know, banquets, whatever they want to do. The town doesn't have a whole lot of that right now, and we're trying to make a place for that to happen and help us get revenue as a volunteer fire department.
What's the basic idea behind construction type? Like, is it just gonna be like metal frame?
Metal frame,
Okay.
yep, just metal frame, concrete floor building.
Wonderful.
Nothing fancy.
That's what it's for. Yeah.
I recall when that lot was being used as a junkyard for cars, and so this is a vast improvement over that. One thing, though, when we would drive by the junk cars, we wish that it would be, you know, behind a fence or something. Will this have some way of, so you don't have to look at all the equipment, and it's going to be behind something decorative or a fence?
Yeah, so all the equipment will be inside the building.
Ah,
There shouldn't be nothing outside the building.
okay.
And of course, they'll have to comply with whatever the landscape requirements are and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff, so
Yeah.
there's that.
Vast improvement.
Yeah. Any other questions? No? Okay, sounds good. I guess the other is, so do we have to authorize the public hearing, or you said the,
No, sir.
okay.
No, because it's a CUP application, and,
Oh, I'm sorry, I was moving
Or
along. No, everybody was good with that. Thank you very much, Darla. We appreciate you joining us.
Sure, thank you.
so yes, the final item, we do need to authorize a public hearing. You want me to take over from there?
Sure.
Page 23, as I mentioned last month, a potential coffee roasting business has inquired about zoning for such. They've been looking at some buildings in town, most likely will be in the Resort Commercial RC District. We first looked at treating it like you would a microbrewery or a brew pub because they have similar impacts on the community, mostly that they vent outside and the smell. What I've learned is that the venting will, no matter what, either they go through the roof or they do the pipe at a 90-degree angle and take it up. So the venting will occur above the building. But anyway, so we looked at that, and rather than just do a definition for a coffee roastery, I looked around, believe me, I looked around. I looked at every zoning ordinance I could in the state, and I reached out to a whole lot of zoning administrators because I didn't see coffee roastery in any zoning ordinance. And what I found, of course, is that most towns and counties have either light manufacturing or different grades of commercial that we don't have here because of the type of town that we are. What I put together was, instead of just looking at a coffee roastery, consider the small-scale production, so that if somebody comes in later on and wants to, say, bake bread, that they'll sell wholesale, not just a cottage industry, or they want to manufacture jewelry that they'll be selling, not just retail, that this would be a place, like a maker's type district that some people have, but we're small. So that's what I how I approach this after talking to a whole lot of folks. And so you'll see the proposed text amendment really just adds that definition of small-scale production. And I limited it to not to exceed 6,000 square feet. That's what retail is in those in some of those districts. C1 allows more square footage, but, and that it would require a conditional use permit, an RC and CR, and it would be by right in the C1. And so that would be added, sorry. Where it would be allowed would be zoning text amendment 2604 to allow it in those different districts. Of course, we would list it in the zoning code accordingly, and to allow for small-scale production not to exceed 6,000 square feet. And then zoning text amendment 26 defines it. So typical small-scale production would include, but are not limited to, vertical farming, which may be a thing soon here, maybe, I don't know. Food products, non-alcoholic beverages. I did not specifically list coffee roastery or tea production. I think the industry code is coffee and tea production. If you'd like that spelled out, I certainly can do that. But you'll see the types of things. I took out some things that I didn't think were appropriate in our district that other localities allow, so. Discussion, thoughts, before we move forward?
I was curious about, often the breweries also might want to roast their own, you know, hops or whatever. Would that be allowed under this as well?
I suppose it would.
I'm just curious.
Well, this is non-alcoholic beverage, but yeah, if they were just doing their grains,
For making beer. Okay.
food products.
The only,
But
the
I
only
can-
question I had about this was that we are giving it by right in C1. C1 includes our marinas. That's, I think, how they're coded. And while there's not much space, there may be space on one of them, one of the marinas that would allow for this. Do we want to make it, should we be making it by right in C1, or should we also be requiring a cup in C1? That was my question about this. I'm not against it.
Right, and
Incidentally, I
that's
just-
a question for the commission. I will say that we just paralleled the microbrewery and the brew pubs, because I also vent, and nobody probably notices it much. The feedback I got within the office was, I'd rather smell coffee roasting in the summer than the dirty river. So, but that's a question for you all. We just kind of, like I said, paralleled it to, assuming that you considered those other factors when you were looking at the microbrews and the brew pubs.
Yeah, I don't feel strongly about it, but I just put it in front of the commission then as to whether we don't think that a cup might not be appropriate in all three instances to make sure nobody takes advantage of us in the marina locations. I think if somebody wants to do this next to Food Lion, I don't care. But, you know, since the esteemed masters in the town council didn't choose to change the zoning for the marinas when they had that opportunity, that we might want to consider making cups across all these areas. But I'm not going to make a fuss about it.
I don't know what the logic is. I mean, Ice House brews beer down there, right? And vents, so,
Well,
but
since
I don't know.
that you're advocating for a more general but less limiting, so for this particular instance, yes, I agree that a coffee roaster, no, I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of pushback. But since we're more generally trying to use the definition and small-scale production of other potential types of businesses, that it would be prudent to do that, because we do have some C1 that borders residential area, or at least is close enough that it could potentially be impacted.
Yeah, I agree, and a lot of the questions I have, I think, are what would come up in the CUP process, just,
Okay.
as far as, are we gonna end up with something that looks like a warehouse, like that one house on Monroe Bay, the warehouse with the apartments? Is it gonna be similar looking to all the other houses that surround? Is it gonna follow the same height requirements? Like, those are all my questions, and they would be addressed in the CUP process.
I can tell you for this particular business, they're looking at existing buildings
Okay.
in that district already.
But we're talking about amending for.
Right,
the general
yeah,
case. But
right.
yeah, absolutely for this. I'm less concerned about this particular use case. My concern is when you say, okay, well, let's just, because we don't have a specific coffee roastery kind of language other places, and we're looking at general production, manufacturing processes just have a higher likelihood of impacting their adjacent spaces.
Yeah, no, I agree with all that.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, I think that's pretty much the feedback we've got is just let's CUP all the way across the board for the different ones.
Yeah.
It can still be, by right under the CUP process, but, yeah. I think
And that
that's-
kind of protects
Yeah.
us later down the road,
Right.
and we can do what we need.
That works for me. For
Agreed.
this, again, this one, it's not gonna slow it down because he knows he's gonna need a cup in the buildings that he's looking
Yeah.
at would be RC, and that will protect the other district. That's fine. I'll bring it back that way.
Yeah, when we were talking to Dan Wildman about about 100 Washington Avenue, one of the uses he suggested was actually maybe it'll be a bakery that bakes and, sells bread out of there. So we'll, if it was necessary, we then established it for that area as well, which would be probably a CUP for that if that's what they wanted to do.
Right.
Just thought
There's
I'd mention
several
that.
small localities that have like makers markets now where you've got a couple different things. Somebody's baking bread, somebody's roasting coffee, somebody's
Yeah.
selling
Yeah, it's a-
frozen organic beef and all in one place.
It's actually a specific design methodology for mechanical systems to exhaust to the street for those types of vendors, because it's free advertising, essentially. Walk down the street, follow your nose, kind of like the cartoons where you.
I'm one of the few that doesn't drink coffee and doesn't like the smell of coffee,
Well,
but
the
I know I'm
bakery
way
would be
out ahead of
nice.
Yeah, bakery.
Yes, you'd be hard pressed to find
Make some
somebody.
sourdough bread and I'll be there.
Right, so.
All right, so
Awesome.
that one I do need a motion to approve.
You can make the recommendation.
We're motioning for authorization of a public hearing for ZTA 2603 and ZTA 2604. For which meeting? Our
The
next,
April meeting, it's gonna
our
be a
next
full,
regular meeting, okay.
yeah. It'll be a full schedule.
Do we need to add to that motion this thing about making C1 subject to CUPs?
Yes.
Subject to that.
Subject to that, yeah. Thank you for the clarification. Can I get a motion?
I motion that we approve based on the C1 being included for CUP.
Okay, and a second?
Second?
Fantastic. All right, do we need to do a roll call, or is it just,
It's just for, yeah,
yeah, at the public hearing a little bit, so, yes.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay, all in favor of authorizing public hearing for ZTA 2603 and ZTA 2604, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, unanimously authorize the public hearing notifications. And that is our final piece of business for this evening. So I am adjourning the Town of Colonial Beach Planning Commission meeting for March 12th, 2026 at 7:15.
Well, I'll tell you what, I didn't know.